So this is one of those weeks that really frustrates ministers because I have this wonderful sermon to give you about our natural world and awe, and then everything happens on Thursday and Friday and Saturday, and it doesn't seem quite up to the task anymore. Nevertheless, I'm going to give you that sermon after I say a few other things, so I hope you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
Good. I spoke about General Assembly and the thousands of Unitarian Universalists who are out there, including, do y'all call her Reverend Vicky? I don't want to say inappropriate. Reverend Weinstein, but I don't want to be too informal here. Are these her glasses? I feel like I should put them on. Don't tell her I did that. So let's stop for a second and talk. What a week. I don't assume that everyone here is a huge supporter of equal marriage, though I'm guessing in a UU congregation that might be the case. I won't assume we all support the Affordable Care Act, known as Obamacare, though I think it's a net good for our country and for the vast majority of people living in this country. And besides that, as I mentioned in the prayer, we're barely more than a week from a horrible, tragic shooting in Charleston, South Carolina. The memorials for the victims are going on right now this weekend. Perhaps you caught the one at which our president spoke on Friday. And then, just to add some things I'm personally interested in, maybe it's your thing, maybe it isn't, I've enjoyed the beauty and drama of the Women's World Cup going on right now. The U.S. team is now in the semifinals. They finally played a game in which they looked pretty good instead of like barely surviving. So I have hope, perhaps, maybe. And I mentioned those thousands of our fellow Unitarian Universalists out in Portland, Oregon right now at General Assembly. In fact, after you're done here, you might go home and watch on live stream the Sunday morning worship from out there, because they're 3 hours behind us. So you could actually catch both. It's really, really good. It's by my colleague Allison Miller, who serves one of those churches in northern New Jersey that I always get confused because there's a whole bunch of them. In any case, you might check that out. Those thousands of people are meeting and learning and working and worshiping and having a whole lot of fun out there. So that is a week deserving of awe, and I could say a whole sermon about any one of those, but I want to talk about that feeling of awe instead. So let me do that, especially in our natural world, beautiful as it is here today, even with a little rain. Here we go. I'm standing on the very top of Enchanted Rock. The view extends for miles and miles and miles in every direction. The hills, scrubby trees, the little plateaus, the occasional ranch house or barn, a few roads you can see, most of them dirt. Because you can see so much from the top of this big lump of granite, and on this day, this particular day that I was there, there wasn't a single cloud in the sky. It was blue, perfectly blue, that particular shade of blue you see in the sky on those clear days that doesn't seem to exist anywhere else, no matter how much I like to copy it. So I looked down the slope of this gigantic pink rock, across to the other peaks that surrounded Little Enchanted Rock, Buzzard's Peak. There's a stream far below with water today, which is unusual for that area because it had rained just the night before. And often it's so dry here in the Texas Hill Country that even creek beds are empty. But today, on this day, the water is gently flowing. Flowers are in bloom. There are little fish that I can't see from up here, but I know that they are there. And way up here, hundreds of feet above the valley below, the wind hits you with a surprising amount of force, because down below there's hardly a whisper of it, but here, with no vegetation to slow it down, it's strong, so strong that even in 90-degree weather it feels cool there. And on top of this smooth piece of rock, there are tiny oases. A stubby tree grows in a pool of dirt and water. Grasses find some tiny bit of purchase on the granite. And some of those same fish that are down in that stream are up here too, barely minnows in a pool of water. And I sat there and wondered for a long, long time, how do the fish get from down there to up here? Because there's usually isn't water up here, only when it rains. But here they are, swimming away. And there I was standing on top of the world, taking it all in. It's that sense that something is larger than me, something amazing, and seeing everything so much more than I could hold myself in my life or in my mind. Standing there taking all this in, not thinking really about anything. If you're like me, you're so often thinking, thoughts colliding in your brain. Our world doesn't have the time or the freedom to just take in what's around us and hold it with a sense of awe, because I love that word awe, even though it sounds kind of strange when you say it by itself. Awe. Does my accent come out a little when I say that? I don't have much of one anymore, but I did grow up in Texas. I like, too, that you get both awful and awesome from it. In fact, it's all the same thing. Awe means both terrible and frightening and amazing and wonderful, and in both cases, larger and deeper and more than we can really comprehend. In fact, it's this sense that the Jewish scriptures speak of God. What we often hear translated as the fear of God is better translated as awe, in both the awful and awesome sense. For many of us, I imagine, we experience this sense of awe in looking at the natural world, at the universe. It's the majesty of nature where we experience awe. This is a long-standing tradition in Unitarian Universalist circles. It goes back at least to Thoreau and Emerson, and probably a whole lot longer. Thoreau, that famous writer who had grown up in a Unitarian family, though he eschewed the church quite quickly, he writes extensively about nature and his feelings about it. He is captivated by how different it is from the things that we usually see and know. He says this in a little bit of an extended quote, bear with me. He says, "It is difficult to conceive of a region uninhabited by people. We habitually presume the presence and influence everywhere, and yet we have not seen pure nature unless we have seen her thus vast and drear and inhuman, though in the midst of cities. Nature was here something savage and awful, though beautiful. I looked with awe at the ground I trod on to see what the powers had made there, the form and fashion and material of their work." He continues, "This was that earth of which we have heard, made out of chaos and old night. Here was no garden, but the unhandselled globe. It was not lawn, nor pasture, nor mead, nor woodland, nor lea, nor arable, nor wasteland. It was the fresh, natural surface of the planet Earth as it was made forever and ever, so nature made it, and people may use it if they can. It was matter, vast, terrific. Not Mother Earth that we have heard of, not for him to tread on or be buried in. No, it were being too familiar even to let our bones lie there. The home, this, of necessity and fate." So he writes in The Maine Woods. Now I'm guessing probably no one here has been to Enchanted Rock. You can correct me if I'm wrong. No? Okay. Maybe you haven't even ever heard of it, and that's okay. It's a state park in a fairly remote part of Texas, about a 2-hour drive from Austin, where I grew up. And it's probably my favorite place on earth. The rock is really massive. It's one big piece of rock. It rises 425 feet above the surrounding valley in a very flat area otherwise. But that is nothing, is the interesting part, because the rock you can see is just a tiny part, because actually that rock and Little Enchanted Rock and Buzzard Peak and the numerous quarries in the area are all part of the same huge piece of granite. It's called a batholith. I'm not slurring my word there. It's really called batholith. That covers more than 100 square miles below much of west central Texas. Now think about that for a second. 100 square miles is far more than Boston. It's a good chunk of the metro area too. All underneath of it, one big piece of granite that occasionally pokes up through the surface. I saw an estimate somewhere of how much it must weigh, and it's, of course, billions and billions of tons. It's hard to even estimate it. That is awesome for me. And I think, even as long as I've been here in New England, of the Texas Hill Country, where Enchanted Rock is, that's what nature is to me. That's what I think of. It's the place where I go to feel that thing Thoreau was talking about in the woods. That sense of something we did not make. Something that was here before any of us and will be here long after us. I know Enchanted Rock, it's a state park. It's not really untouched wilderness, but it feels like that in many ways. Maybe you have a place you go to sometimes for that too. The coast or the White Mountains or deep in the forests. A place that feels strange and familiar all at once. This world, our universe, is so unimaginably large and so amazing. It's more than any of us can fully understand, and that's okay. Because, again, I think one of our failings, my failing, I'll take it upon myself, not y'all, is that I want to understand everything. I really do. But sometimes understanding or thinking is not the right thing to do. Sometimes appreciating is what should be done. It's right to appreciate, to take in something wonderful, whether that is the majesty of our world and universe or a great piece of art in front of us, the wonderful music we're so often treated to in our sanctuaries. How then do we access that sense of awe, of reverence in our daily lives? We see amazing things all the time, but it's easy to overlook them. As they say, you walk right past the roses without smelling them. We access that awe, though, when we stop. When we stop and look around us, allow ourselves to let the surroundings come into us and to fill us with that sense of awe. We allow ourselves to be moved and to move our very beings. We open ourselves to beauty and wonder. That is when we can experience that awe, and that is when it can transform us for the better. And this, too, is what being in religious community, what opening ourselves up to transformation should be all about. It's about allowing that sense of awe to enter us and transform us for the better. Into something new and different, into a better tomorrow. There's a lovely poem by William Blake in our hymnal. You can look later. It's set to what I think is a particularly different melody, or I would have people sing it more often. But instead, let me read a bit of it to you. There's many stanzas. This is just a little bit of it. But he writes, "To see the world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wildflower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour." See, I think we can see the world in a grain of sand and view the whole universe with wonder. We are called to be people who experience awe. We have reverence for life and for our natural world, for the very act of creation and recreation we see in our world every day. This reverence is the opening up of our very beings to that experience of the divine, however we conceive of it. So in those tiny fish skittering around that pool high atop Enchanted Rock, I saw the entire universe. There was a tree at the side of the pool, the grass and algae, and those little fish. All the world there in that little pool of water, here on top of in the middle of a huge expanse of granite, gently and then more strongly sloping towards earth below. So my friends, I hope you find the time today and in coming days to truly see the world in a grain of sand, to look at a flower and see heaven right here on earth, to find that sense of reverence in our world and within yourself, to see creation for the gift it is, a garden here for us to take in, to enjoy with all our minds and bodies and hearts, and to take care of. So find that awe, embrace it with all your being, and may it be so forever.